Get out, you're not welcome here." My daughter-in-law screamed the moment I pulled out a chair at the Christmas Eve dinner table inside the house I had built with my own hands. My son raised his glass, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "Just leave, Dad. You're ruining the evening." I quietly stood up, walked to the front door without another word, because neither of them had any idea that the people about to walk through that door would destroy the plan they'd spent years building. I need you to stay with me through this one. Before we begin, leave me a comment. Is it morning where you are? Or are you listening late into the night? Your voice here means more than you know. A quick note, some elements in this story are fictionalized to strengthen the message. What's real is the lesson it carries. "What are you doing here?" Vanessa's voice cut through the Christmas Eve air like a blade through cedar. I stood in the doorway of the dining room I had framed with Oregon fir 42 years ago, staring at a table with no place set for me. 9 seats. Crystal glasses catching light from the chandelier Eleanor and I had hung in 1987. Fine china arranged with precision. Snow falling outside windows I had installed by hand. But not one fork. Not one napkin. Not one chair for the man who had built every beam in this house. Vanessa stood at the head of the table, my table carved from salvaged oak as an anniversary gift 32 years ago, pointing toward the hallway, like I was hired help in the wrong room. She was 34, dressed in a designer suit that probably cost more than my first truck. Her dark hair pulled back, tight eyes holding the cold certainty of someone never told no. "This dinner is for people who still create value," she said, voice pitched for the investors to hear. "You're just a breathing invoice we haven't processed yet." The words should have stung. Maybe 6 months ago they would have. But I had spent 8 months learning to measure things differently. Vanessa thought she was dismissing me. She had no idea she was giving me exactly what I needed. My son Corbin, 36 at the far end, with champagne in hand, didn't look up. Just poured another glass with the practiced ease of a man who believed he had already won. Once I had looked at that face and seen Eleanor's eyes, her intelligence, her precision. Now I saw something else. Something I should have recognized years earlier. "Dad, you're confused again," Corbin said, glancing my way with bored dismissal. "Go back to your room. Vernon Ashford." Vanessa's father cleared his throat from his window seat. 62, silver-haired, wearing a watch worth more than most cars. "Please excuse the interruption," he told the 2 men across from him, Graham Sinclair and Ellsworth Redmond, both in expensive suits, both holding investment portfolios they thought were worth something. "My son-in-law's father has declining health. We're exploring care options." Graham, 55, with the cautious eyes of a developer, burned before shifted uncomfortably. Ellsworth, 68 and semi-retired, set down his wine and looked at me with something like pity. I let them look. Let Vernon's wife, Celeste, glance up from her napkin long enough to confirm her daughter's version that I was the problem, the inconvenience, the sad old man who couldn't accept his time was over. Let them settle into their comfortable narrative where I was helpless and they were doing me a favor. That table. The oak came from a Eugene mill salvaged from a demolished building in 1991. I spent 3 months joining every corner by hand, no screws, just mortise and tenon joinery that gets stronger with age. Eleanor said it was the most beautiful thing I had ever built. She ran her fingers along the grain and told me it would outlive us both. Now 9 strangers sat around it like they owned it, crystal glasses sweating onto wood I had sealed myself. The humiliation was supposed to break me. Vanessa needed me small, confused, ready to shuffle back to the room they had given me like a defeated old man. For 8 months I had given her exactly that performance. But they didn't understand I wasn't here by accident. This moment, this precise configuration of arrogance and certainty and investors bearing witness, This was what I had been engineering since I found the forged power of attorney in Corbin's desk. They thought I had stumbled into their dinner party. They had no idea I had been counting down to it. I didn't yell, didn't beg, didn't ask for my seat at the table I built. Instead, I looked at my son, really looked at him, maybe for the first time in years, and smiled. Not with warmth, not with forgiveness, but with the cold, patient certainty of a master craftsman who knows exactly which beam will collapse first. "Enjoy your dinner," I said quietly. Then I turned toward the front door. Behind me, Vanessa exhaled with relief. "Finally," she whispered to Corbin. "I thought we'd have to drag him out." My apologies," Corbin said, smoothly, voice shifting back to his investor pitch. "As I was saying, the property transfer timeline is accelerated. We're looking at closing by mid-January, which means your returns will—" His voice faded as I walked down the hallway, past photographs Eleanor had hung in chronological order: our wedding, the house half built, Corbin as a baby, Christmases when family meant something. The hardwood creaked under my weight, same boards I had laid in 1982. A carpenter knows before the first crack shows, before the first groan under stress when a structure is about to fail. You learn to read the signs, the way a joint shifts, the sound a beam makes when weight redistributes, the subtle tells separating strong from compromised. I had been measuring stress points in this house for 8 months, watching Corbin and Vanessa build their scheme like amateurs building a deck without checking for rot. They thought I was beaten. Thought 8 months of humiliation had turned me into what they needed: a confused old man with no fight left, ready to be warehoused, ready to sign whatever papers they put in front of me. They were wrong. My hand wrapped around the cold brass door handle, the same handle I had installed 32 years ago, the day Eleanor and I moved into the house we built with our own hands, and a construction loan we paid off in 7 years. Behind me, Vanessa's voice resumed her pitch, confident and smooth, promising returns on properties she had no legal right to sell. She thought I was walking out into the snow, broken and defeated. She had no idea what I was about to let in. But before I opened that door, before I let in what was waiting on the other side, you need to understand how I got there. 18 months before that Christmas Eve dinner, I stood in the rain beside Eleanor's casket and realized I knew how to build everything except how to live alone. We had 42 years. Not enough. Never enough. But 42 years of waking up to someone who understood that a well-fitted mortise joint was a form of love, that the smell of fresh-cut cedar was better than any cologne, that a man who worked with his hands was working with his soul. I met Eleanor in 1981 when I was building my first real workshop. Not the garage setup I'd been using, but an actual structure with proper ventilation and space for a full drafting table. She walked past the construction site every morning on her way to the elementary school where she taught 5th grade. One morning, she stopped and watched me frame a doorway. When I looked up, she smiled and said, "You measure 3 times before you cut once." That's either wisdom or fear. Wisdom learned from fear, I told her. We were married 6 months later. The house came next. This house, the one I would later lose and fight to reclaim. I built it myself over 3 years, every beam hand-selected, every window frame fitted with the kind of precision Eleanor said was either beautiful or obsessive. The first night we slept here, the bedroom didn't have windows yet, just framed openings covered with plastic sheeting. Rain drummed against it all night. Eleanor laughed in the darkness and said, "A house without windows just means the light comes from inside." I used that light for 42 years. Then, in June of 2022, cancer came for her with the kind of speed that makes a mockery of careful planning. 3 months from diagnosis to hospice. The doctor, a young man with kind eyes and a voice that had delivered too much bad news, said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Langley. The cancer was more aggressive than we anticipated. It's a matter of days now. Days." After 42 years, our ending was measured in days. She died on June 12th, just after dawn, with her hand in mine, and sunlight coming through the hospital window the way it used to come through our bedroom. I remember thinking that light should have stopped, that if Eleanor Langley was no longer in the world, light had no business continuing, like nothing had changed. At her funeral, I couldn't breathe. Literally could not pull air into my lungs without feeling like my chest was collapsing inward. She was my load-bearing wall, and now the whole structure was coming down. For 42 years, I had built things that lasted. Houses that withstood Oregon winters. Furniture that families passed down through generations. But I never learned how to build a life that could stand alone. 3 weeks after I buried her on a Sunday afternoon in early July, while rain hammered the windows, Corbin and Vanessa showed up with flowers and concern. "Dad," Corbin said, settling onto the couch with the careful posture of someone delivering rehearsed lines. "We hate seeing you here all alone. Mom wouldn't want you living in this huge house by yourself." Vanessa sat beside him, her expression perfectly calibrated between sympathy and practicality. "My company is entering a crucial expansion phase," she said. "If we could save on rent for a year, it would help us build capital while making sure you're not isolated." It made sense. Or grief made it make sense. I was 72 years old, rattling around in a 4-bedroom house that still smelled like Eleanor's lavender soap, eating cereal for dinner, because cooking for one person felt like admitting she was really gone. "We'd take care of you," Corbin added. "Make sure you're eating right, keep you company. It would be good for all of us." I should have said no. I should have recognized the performance, the slight glance Vanessa gave Corbin when she thought I wasn't looking the way their concern felt theatrical rather than genuine. I should have noticed that when Corbin stood to get water, his laptop was open on the coffee table, showing a folder labeled Estate Transition Phase 1. I saw it. 2 seconds of clear view before Vanessa stood and casually closed the laptop. Estate Transition Phase 1. Not Dad's care plan or moving logistics. Estate. Transition. But I told myself I was being paranoid. That loneliness makes a man see shadows in sunlight. That my son wouldn't come to his grieving father with an agenda. How does a man who spent his life measuring angles to the 16th of an inch miss a warning sign that glaring grief, I learned, is the sawdust that blinds you to what's right in front of your face? They moved in 3 days later. That first night, I took my usual evening walk around the neighborhood, a route Eleanor and I had walked together for years. When I returned at 10:30, I punched my security code into the panel by the front door. The same code I had used for 15 years. The same 4 digits that Eleanor had complained were too obvious because they were our anniversary month and day. The panel flashed red. Invalid code. I tried again, careful with each number. Red, invalid. Footsteps behind me. I turned to find Vanessa standing in the dark hallway, backlit by the kitchen light. She reached past me and entered a different code. The panel beeped green. The lock clicked open. The system had a glitch this afternoon. She said, her voice casual, almost bored. I reset it. She looked at me then, and in the dim light from the security panel, I saw something in her expression that made my skin go cold. People who live on borrowed space don't need the master code. She walked away without another word, disappearing back into the kitchen like she owned the place. Because in her mind, she already did. I stood in that dark hallway, staring at the green light on the security panel, a system I had installed in a house I had built with a code I no longer controlled. My hands wanted to shake. My voice wanted to demand answers, to throw them out, to reclaim what was mine. But a carpenter never drives a nail into wood he hasn't measured twice. I needed to understand the full structure of what they were building before I decided how to tear it down. They had been in my house for 6 hours. The morning after Vanessa changed my security code, I woke at 5 and walked through the house I built, measuring the depth of my mistake. Borrowed space. The words had echoed through my sleep like a hammer hitting the wrong nail over and over. Borrowed space in the house Eleanor and I had paid off 15 years ago. In the structure I had framed with my own hands, where every window opened, because I had planned each sash to perfection, where every door hung straight, because I knew how to read a level. I stood in the kitchen drinking coffee as dawn broke over the backyard, and I understood something fundamental had shifted. The security code wasn't a glitch. It was an opening move. While I was still raw with grief, still waking up, reaching for Eleanor in an empty bed, Vanessa had been measuring load-bearing walls and calculating exactly how much weight I could hold before I collapsed. She had miscalculated. A carpenter doesn't tear down a structure until he understands which wall is load-bearing. I needed to see the full blueprint of what they were building before I decided where to apply force. So I would watch. I would measure. I would document every move they made. I would give them enough rope. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks of watching Vanessa rearrange furniture Eleanor had chosen, of hearing Corbin on phone calls, discussing property values and investment timelines, of feeling like a guest in my own home. I said nothing. Smiled when expected. Nodded when addressed. Played the grieving widower too lost in sorrow to notice the walls closing in. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, I returned from the hardware store to find 2 movers in my office. Not the guest room. Not the spare bedroom. My office, the room where I had drafted every design for 42 years, where the afternoon light came through the west window at exactly the angle Eleanor said made me look like I was painting with shadows instead of pencils. 42 years of hand-drawn blueprints were being tossed into cardboard boxes like kindling. My National Craftsmanship Award, the one I received from the Oregon Woodworkers Guild in 2015, the one Eleanor had cried over because she said it proved what she had always known, was stuffed into a plastic garbage bag alongside old magazines. Vanessa stood by the window with her phone to her ear, gesturing to the movers like a conductor directing an orchestra of demolition. "My company needs a professional workspace," she said, when she finally noticed me in the doorway. She didn't lower her phone, didn't even look at me directly. "The investors need to see a corporate background during video conferences. This room has the best lighting." "Now, these are 42 years of my designs," I said, keeping my voice level. "My entire career is in those boxes." She looked at me, then really looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes I had been trying not to see for 2 weeks. Not indifference, not even cruelty. Just cold, practical assessment, the way you look at an old appliance you're about to replace. "Your career is over, Harold," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut oak. "Mine is just beginning. You can move your personal things to the basement whenever you're ready." I'd spent 42 years reading wood grain, seeing the future split before it happened, the rot before it showed the failure before the crack. Why couldn't I read my own son's grain? Why couldn't I see that the boy who used to hand me screws while I built his treehouse had grown into a man who married someone who looked at me like I was lumber to be cleared? As she turned back to her phone call, gesturing toward the door in dismissal, my eyes caught her laptop screen on the new glass desk they had already installed. A furniture design filled the monitor, clean lines, innovative joinery, the kind of craftsmanship that takes decades to master. I knew that design. I had created it in 2019. An exclusive commission piece for a client in Seattle who wanted a media cabinet that looked like sculpture. The mortise and tenon joinery had taken me 6 months to perfect 3 prototypes before the client accepted the final piece. I remembered Eleanor bringing me coffee at 2 in the morning, while I adjusted the angles for the 4th time, her hand on my shoulder saying, "It's already perfect, you perfectionist." But on Vanessa's screen, under the familiar lines I had drawn with my own hand, the branding read, "Langley Designs Copyright 2022, with her company logo beneath it. She wasn't just taking my office. She was selling my life's work as her own. I memorized the design number visible in the corner, 2019-HC-47. My filing system, and walked calmly down the stairs they were forcing me to call my primary route. Past the main floor, down to the basement, to the room with the washer and dryer and a fold-out couch where apparently I now lived. I closed the door and called Owen Hawthorne. Owen was 52, carrying 20 years of sawdust in his lungs from working in my shop. Eleanor had hired him during the Christmas rush of 2003 when we were drowning in orders, and he had stayed on as workshop manager, becoming more friend than employee somewhere around year 3. If anyone knew what was happening with my design archive, it was Owen. "Owen," I said, when he answered, keeping my voice low. "I need you to check something for me, quietly. Design number 2019-HC-47. Has anyone been requesting files from the workshop archive Hamkikati?" The silence on the other end lasted 3 seconds too long. "Harold." Owen said finally, his voice tight in a way I had never heard before. "You need to come down here now. This is bigger than one design." Those designs weren't just blueprints. They were Eleanor sitting beside me at the drafting table, her reading glasses slipping down her nose, while she suggested a curve instead of an angle. They were the smell of fresh walnut shavings. They were every client who had trusted me to build something that would outlast them, who had paid not just for furniture, but for legacy. And Vanessa was selling them like they were hers. Like 42 years of my life was just inventory to be monetized. "How long?" I asked. Owen's voice wasn't just tense anymore. It was shaking. In 20 years of working together through client disasters and supply chain collapses, and the week Eleanor died when I couldn't function, and Owen ran everything alone, I had never heard that tone in his voice. The silence stretched. Then Owen whispered 2 words that changed everything. Since 2019. 3 years. Those 2 words from Owen kept echoing in my head as I sat in my basement room that night, staring at the concrete walls. Not 3 weeks. Not since Eleanor's funeral. 3 years. The first design request had come through in March 2020, while Eleanor was still alive, while she was still sleeping in the bed upstairs, while I still believed my son loved me. Corbin had been planning this since before his mother died. "But I thought you'd authorized it," Owen had said on the phone, his voice tight with the kind of guilt you carry when you realize you've been an accomplice to something terrible without knowing it. "The requests came through your company email. Professional language, proper authorization codes. I never questioned it, Harold. I'm so sorry." I told Owen I'd call him back. Then I sat in that basement room with its single high window and the smell of motor oil seeping through the wall from the garage, and I understood that everything I thought I knew about my son was a blueprint drawn on tissue paper. A week later, they came from my bedroom. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Corbin and Vanessa approached me in the living room with expressions of carefully calibrated concern. Corbin sat on the arm of Eleanor's favorite chair, the wingback she used to read in every evening, and spoke with the kind of gentle condescension you use on children. "Dad, we worry about you on those stairs," he said. "Your knees aren't what they used to be. What if you fall? The room downstairs is safer, private, away from our noise." Vanessa nodded with practiced sympathy. "We just want you comfortable and secure. The garage room has its own entrance. You'll have complete privacy." Privacy, as if privacy was what I wanted in the house I built in the bedroom Eleanor and I had shared for 40 years. But I said nothing. I carried my things down those stairs, 3 days of boxes, one trip after another. Books, clothes. The photograph of Eleanor in her wedding dress, the one where she's laughing, because I'd gotten sawdust in her veil during the ceremony. Each trip felt like descending into my own grave. Each armload of belongings felt like burying another piece of myself. And all of it, I would learn 2 days later, was so they could stage my bedroom like a museum exhibit. I found the email by accident. They'd left it on the kitchen counter, printed out with coffee stains on the margin, sloppy, arrogant, the kind of mistake people make when they're so confident in their control they stop being careful. Statikuka, Premium Staging Package Master Suite Photography for Investor Pitch Deck. Scheduled April 28th. Please confirm furniture arrangement matches upscale estate aesthetic. They hadn't moved me for my safety. They'd moved me so they could photograph my bedroom and sell it to strangers as proof they already owned the estate. I stood in that kitchen holding the email, and I understood something fundamental about the structure they were building. This wasn't just theft. It was systematic erasure. They were removing me from my own house, one room at a time, one security code at a time, one piece of my life at a time, until I was nothing but a name on documents they would forge, and a body they would warehouse somewhere I couldn't fight back. But they had made a critical miscalculation. A master carpenter knows the difference between a structural crack and a cosmetic flaw. What I was witnessing wasn't surface damage. It was systematic demolition of the foundation, one load-bearing beam at a time. And once you understand the pattern of demolition, you understand exactly where to rebuild. I would not confront them yet. Not until I understood the full blueprint. The sound that woke me at 11:30 that night was unmistakable heavy furniture scraping across the hardwood floors I'd laid with my own hands 40 years ago. I lay in the narrow bed in my garage room, listening to the scrape and drag directly above my head. Master bedroom. The ceiling was thin enough that I could trace the path of movement from the corner where Eleanor's dressing table had stood for 2 decades across the floor out into the hallway. I got up, moved quietly to my door, cracked it open just enough to see up the short flight of stairs that led to the main floor. Vanessa appeared at the top of the stairs, walking backward, pulling something on furniture dollies. Even in the dim hallway light, I recognized the curves of the piece immediately. Eleanor's vanity. I had spent 6 months building that dressing table for our 20th anniversary. Hand-selected walnut from a mill in Salem. Mortise and tenon joints so precise you couldn't slip paper between them. 3 drawers with dovetail joinery, the bottom one with Eleanor's grandmother's initials carved into the wood, E.J.H., for Elizabeth Jane Holloway, the woman who had raised Eleanor after her parents died. Eleanor had cried when she saw it, said it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever built. She sat at that vanity every morning for 22 years, brushing her hair in the mirror I'd mounted with brass hinges I'd polished by hand. And now Vanessa was wheeling it toward the front door like it was yard sale inventory. I watched from the shadows as she maneuvered it through the doorway. A cargo van idled in the driveway, back doors open. The driver, a young man in coveralls, helped her load it. "Careful with that," Vanessa said, her voice carrying through the quiet night. "It's worth $18,000. Buyers waiting at the gallery." $18,000. For the physical embodiment of 22 years of Eleanor's mornings. For the piece of furniture she loved more than any other thing in our house. For the proof that I had loved her enough to spend 6 months perfecting something just for her. They closed the van doors. The engine started. Vanessa signed something on a clipboard, and I caught a glimpse of the receipt taped to her copy, Pacific Crest Antiques, $18,000 even. I stood in that doorway watching the taillights disappear down the street, and I did not chase them, did not shout, did not demand they bring it back, because I needed to see how far they would go. I needed to measure the full depth of their greed before I decided how to destroy them. The next morning, I called Owen before the sun came up. My voice was steady. My instructions were clear. Find that vanity. Track it to whatever gallery she sold it to. Buy it back. I don't care what it costs. Owen didn't ask why. He just said, "Consider it done." Neither of us knew then that Eleanor's vanity would become the centerpiece of their final reckoning. Owen called 2 days later to say he'd found the vanity at Pacific Crest Antiques and was negotiating the buyback. That should have felt like a victory. It didn't. Because that same morning I discovered they had taken something that made Eleanor's vanity look replaceable. The wall safe behind the landscape painting in my bedroom. The bedroom they'd exiled me from held 3 things: Eleanor's wedding ring, our passports, and my mother's gold pocket watch. I waited until they left for a lunch meeting with investors, then climbed the stairs to the master bedroom they'd converted into a staged showroom. The painting hung where it had always hung, a watercolor of the Oregon coast Eleanor had bought at a street fair in Cannon Beach. I lifted it off its hook. The safe was still there, of course. They hadn't found it yet, too well hidden behind the false panel I'd built into the wall in 1987. I spun the combination, the same numbers Eleanor and I had chosen 35 years ago, and pulled the door open. The blue velvet watch box sat in its usual spot beside Eleanor's ring box. But when I lifted it out, when I opened the brass clasp with hands that had started to shake, I found exactly what I'd been afraid I would find: empty. The gold pocket watch my mother had given me 40 years ago was gone. The one with the inscription on the back, to Harold. "May your son become the man you are. With faith and love, Mother." She'd given it to me in 1982, the year Corbin was born, but with specific instructions. "Don't give it to him when he's born, Harold." She'd said, her arthritic fingers closing around mine, the watch warm between our hands. "Give it to him the day you see the man I raised in you reflected in the man he's become." I never gave it to him, because that day never came. So he took it. I carried the empty box downstairs to the kitchen, where Corbin sat at the granite island drinking coffee and scrolling through his phone. I set the velvet box on the counter in front of him without saying a word. He looked up. His face showed the perfect calibration of surprise and concern. No guilt, no recognition, just the practiced expression of someone who had been expecting this moment and had rehearsed his response. "Dad," he said, reaching for the box. "What's this?" "My mother's watch," I said quietly. "The one she gave me for you. The one that was in my safe." He opened the box, examined the empty velvet lining, then looked at me with gentle, patronizing sympathy. "Dad, you've been forgetting things lately. Last week you asked me the same question 3 times. You probably moved the watch yourself and don't remember." The safe combination," I said, keeping my voice level. "Only Eleanor and I ever knew it, Dad." He set down his coffee, stood up, put a hand on my shoulder like I was a confused child. "You wrote it down in your address book 6 months ago. You told me yourself you were worried about forgetting it. I hadn't." But before I could respond, Vanessa entered from the living room, her timing so perfect, it was obviously choreographed. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice dripping with false concern. Ta." "Harold's upset about his mother's watch," Corbin said. "He thinks someone took it from his safe. I've been trying to explain that he probably moved it himself during one of his confused episodes." "Harold," Vanessa said, moving closer, her voice dropping into that particular register people use when speaking to dementia patients. "Grief does terrible things to memory. My uncle had the same issues after my aunt passed. Have you considered seeing a doctor? There are medications now that can help with this kind of thing." I looked at my son, at the woman he'd married, at the performance they were staging with the kind of seamless coordination that comes from practice. My mother died in 1998, holding that watch in her hand, making me promise I'd only give it to Corbin when I saw in him what she'd seen in me. "Not when he's successful, Harold," she'd whispered. "When he's good." I never saw it. And now I understood why there was nothing there to see. "You're probably right," I said, finally taking the empty box back. I must have moved it. I'm sorry for the confusion. I shuffled back down to my garage room, playing the defeated old man they needed me to be. But my mind was razor sharp, cutting through their lies like a saw through softwood. That evening, after they left for dinner at some restaurant, where they would toast to my declining cognitive function, I went to the driveway. Corbin's BMW, the one he parked in what he now called his space, wasn't locked. Why would it be? He owned this house, didn't he? He owned everything in it, including me. I opened the driver's door. The new car smell mixed with Vanessa's perfume made my stomach turn. I checked the glove compartment first. Registration papers, insurance documents, nothing incriminating. Then the center console. Tucked beneath the registration papers folded once a pawn ticket from Eastside Pawn and Loan. Item description: 1920s gold pocket watch, Waltham 17 jewel inscribed. Date 4 days ago. Amount $3,200. $3,200. My mother's faith. Her final gift to the son she'd raised through the Depression, through my father's death, through every hardship that taught her the difference between character and convenience. The watch she'd worn for 40 years. The inscription she'd had engraved while saving every penny, sold for less than Vanessa spent on her last designer handbag. I'd spent 42 years reading wood, seeing the rot before it showed the crack, before it split the weak grain that would fail under stress. But I couldn't read my own son. Or maybe I could, and I'd spent 36 years refusing to see what the grain was telling me. I folded the ticket and put it in my wallet. Then I walked back down to my room by the garage, sat on the edge of the narrow bed, and stared at the concrete wall. I did not cry. I had already done my crying 18 months ago, standing in the rain beside Eleanor's grave. What I felt now was something colder than grief, something that felt very much like clarity. I kept that pawn ticket in my wallet. Not as evidence, I already had enough of that. I kept it as a reminder of the exact moment I stopped being Corbin's father and became his adversary. The next morning, I would begin building the trap that would destroy them both. Building a trap requires patience. It requires observation. It requires understanding your target's patterns so completely that you can predict their next move before they make it. So I watched. For 11 consecutive days, in late June, Vanessa appeared on the front porch at exactly 10:50 in the morning, 10 minutes before the mail carrier's arrival, waiting. I observed from my garage room window high enough to see the driveway, but positioned so she'd never think to look. I kept a notebook documenting everything: date, time, duration. Dennis, the mail carrier, who had been delivering to this route for 15 years, arrived each day at exactly 11 o'clock, with the cheerful consistency of a man who loved his job. He'd hand Vanessa the mail directly, instead of sliding it through the brass mail slot I'd installed in the front door 30 years ago, exchange pleasantries, and continue his route. Every single day, Vanessa would carry that mail straight to her office and lock the door behind her. "Morning, Mrs. Langley." Dennis called on day 3. "Getting a head start on the day, I see. Just like to stay on top of things," Vanessa replied. A woman running a legitimate business doesn't need to intercept physical mail like a border agent looking for contraband. By day 7, I had her pattern mapped. 10:50 appear on porch, 11 retrieve mail, 11:02 office lockdown for minimum 45 minutes, 12:30 emerge shredded documents in a locked bag for professional disposal service pickup every Thursday. She was meticulous, professional, careful, until day 12. On day 12, she dumped her paper shredder's contents into the blue recycling bin in the garage, instead of waiting for the commercial disposal service. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she'd gotten comfortable, confident the confused old man in the garage room was too broken to notice. 42 years of carpentry taught me that patterns reveal intent. A nail driven at the wrong angle once is a mistake. 11 nails driven at the same wrong angle is design. Vanessa's mail ritual wasn't paranoia, it was architecture. And on day 12, she'd left a crack in the foundation. I waited until evening until they left for dinner. Then I retrieved the shredded papers from the garage recycling bin. 90 minutes on my garage room floor, fitting strips together under my reading lamp like a jigsaw puzzle. My reading glasses sliding down my nose, my back aching from concrete. But piece by piece, the document revealed itself. Letterhead, First National Bank of Oregon Home Lending Division. Date June 15, 2023. Dear Mr. Harold Langley, we are pleased to inform you that your home equity line of credit application for $2,400,000 has been approved and is currently in final underwriting. Based on the appraised value of your property at 847 Cascade View Drive, the credit line will be available for disbursement on December 26, 2023. December 26th, the day after Christmas. They weren't just stealing my designs or my furniture. They were liquidating the house itself, the structure I'd built with my own hands, the home Eleanor and I had paid off 15 years ago for $2.4 million. My hand reached for my phone. The bank's number was in my contacts. I could call right now. Report the fraud. Stop it cold. But then my hand stopped. The shredding had been too imperfect. The strips too large. Too easy to reconstruct. Vanessa was never sloppy. I looked up at the ceiling toward the kitchen above. Last week, I'd spotted the camera hidden in the smoke detector positioned perfectly to record anyone at the kitchen table. This was bait. They thought they were hunting me. Thought they'd set the perfect trap plant evidence trigger my reaction film, The Unstable Old Man's Breakdown. But a carpenter doesn't panic when he finds rot in the beams. He measures it, maps it, and plans the demolition carefully. They wanted me to rage, wanted me to call the bank, make accusations, look paranoid. They had a camera waiting to record the crazy old man's breakdown, the same man they'd been telling everyone was suffering from dementia. Not today. I folded the reconstructed letter, slipped it into my shoe beneath the insole, and walked upstairs. The kitchen was dark, except for streetlight through the window. I turned on the light, moved to the coffee maker, measured grounds with deliberate care. Water, filter, grounds, press start. I pulled cream from the refrigerator, added it to my mug with steady hands. Sat down at the table directly beneath the smoke detector. Are you watching this? Vanessa disappointed. I didn't call the bank screaming. Did you expect me to make it that easy? I sipped my coffee slowly, staring at nothing. My face slack with vacant expression. Just an old man drinking evening coffee, unaware his entire life was being stolen. Then just for a second, I let myself smile. Not the warm smile I used to give Eleanor. Not the proud smile I once gave Corbin. A cold smile. A knowing smile. The smile of a carpenter who just found the exact beam to cut, to bring down the entire structure. I looked directly at where I knew the camera lens was hidden, held that smile for exactly 2 seconds, then let it fade back into confusion. Enjoy the footage of a confused old man drinking coffee. Because that confused old man just figured out exactly when you plan to rob him blind. And he has 6 months to build the trap that will destroy you both. I sat at that table for 20 minutes, playing the harmless old man. When I finally shuffled back to my garage room, I pulled out the pawn ticket, the reconstructed loan letter, and started a new list. December 26th. They'd given me their deadline. Now I had exactly 6 months to build something they would never see coming. The first step in building any structure is knowing what you're building on. Foundation assessment. Load-bearing analysis. Understanding exactly what kind of weight the ground beneath you can hold. The next morning, I drove downtown to see the only man I could trust to tell me the truth. Fletcher Garrison's office occupied the entire 31st floor of the glass tower on Southwest Broadway, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Portland skyline I'd helped build 40 years ago. I could see 3 buildings from his window that had my trim work in them, my custom cabinetry, my hand-fitted doors. Now I needed Fletcher to help me tear down something I'd built myself, my son's future. Fletcher, 62 and silver-haired, sat behind a slab of polished mahogany, his hawk-like eyes studying me as I walked in carrying a manila folder. We'd worked together for 3 decades since 1993, when I'd needed my first commercial insurance policy. He'd reviewed the contract when I bought my workshop expansion in 1995. He'd been at Eleanor's funeral. He was the only person outside my family I'd trusted with everything, and now he was the only person I could trust at all. Fletcher, I said, settling into the leather chair across from his desk. I need you to tell me I'm not going crazy. I need you to tell me this is as bad as I think it is. I set down the reconstructed bank letter. The pawn ticket. A handwritten timeline documenting every theft, every violation, every moment since Corbin had walked into my house with flowers and false concern. Fletcher read in absolute silence. His expression darkened with each page, the kind of darkness that comes when a lawyer realizes his client isn't paranoid, he's been targeted. Harold, Fletcher said finally, his voice hard, in a way I'd never heard before. How long has this been going on? Since they moved in. Maybe longer. Owen says the design theft started 3 years ago. Fletcher set down the papers with deliberate care. You didn't confront them? No. You're good. Don't. Not yet. Let me pull the county records first. He turned to his computer fingers, moving across the keyboard with rapid precision. Property databases, legal filing systems, corporate registrations. I watched his face as he navigated screens I couldn't see, watched the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes narrowed. Then he went completely still. In Jesus Christ, Harold. His voice was barely above a whisper. There's a power of attorney on file, dated April 15th, 2023. You never signed this, did you? I never signed anything. I never authorized Corbin to... Look at this signature. He turned the monitor toward me. My signature stared back at me from the screen. Every loop, every pressure point, every quirk of the H, and the way the Y descended below the line. Perfect. Too perfect. It's flawless, Fletcher said, his voice turning clinical prosecutorial. Every loop, every pressure point. This isn't a crude forgery, Harold. This is a professional-grade replication. Machine-pressed using a pressure ink system. Do you understand what that means? I understood that my son had spent money I didn't know he had to create a signature so perfect it would fool a bank. This is 18 U.S.C. Section 495. Fletcher continued, pulling up another screen. Federal forgery of a legal instrument. We're not talking about family dispute or civil fraud anymore. This is a federal crime carrying up to 10 years in prison. 30 years. That's how long Fletcher and I had worked together. He'd been there when my business grew from a garage operation to a workshop with 6 employees. He'd been at Eleanor's bedside the day before she died, helping us update her will while she could still sign her name. He was the only person outside my family I'd trusted with everything, and now he was the only person I could trust at all. A durable power of attorney grants complete authority, Fletcher said, scrolling through the document. Medical decisions, financial transactions, property sales. If this were legitimate, Corbin could do anything institutionalize. You sell your house, drain your accounts, and it would all be legally authorized. But it's not legitimate. No, it's a federal crime. But proving forgery requires forensic analysis, expert testimony, and time we may not have if they're planning to execute that loan in December. Fletcher didn't ask if I wanted to pursue this. He picked up his desk phone and speed-dialed a number from memory. "I'm Dalton," he said, when someone answered, his voice crisp and commanding. I need a full financial autopsy on a father-son fraud case. Forged POA, possible HELOC fraud design, IP theft going back 3 years. I need everything in 72 hours. A pause. Fletcher glanced at me. Yes, it's that serious. I'm sending you the initial documents now. Call me when you have preliminary findings. He hung up and turned back to me. Dalton Mercer, former federal forensic accountant, now the best private investigator in the Pacific Northwest. If there's a money trail, he'll find it. If there are other victims, he'll find them. If this goes deeper than what you've shown me, he'll map every connection. How deep do you think this goes? I asked. Fletcher paused, choosing his words carefully. Harold, a machine-pressed signature replication system costs $15,000 minimum. This isn't amateur hour. This is premeditated professional, and I'd spent my life ensuring structural integrity, calculating load limits, identifying weak joints before they failed. But legal infrastructure worked the same way. That forged POA was the hidden rot in the foundation, and Fletcher was about to show me just how far the damage had spread. Fletcher turned back to his computer screen, started pulling additional county records. Business filings, property liens, court documents. The silence stretched for 30 seconds as his eyes scanned line after line. Then he looked up at me, and I saw something in his expression I'd never seen in 3 decades of working together, genuine alarm. Harold, he said quietly, this is worse than you thought. Fletcher had spent those 72 hours pulling every document he could find. Business licenses, court filings, property transfers. The more he uncovered, the quieter he became. When Dalton Mercer walked into Fletcher's office carrying a leather briefcase that contained the complete financial autopsy of my son's soul, I understood why. Dalton was 47, and unassuming, the kind of man you'd pass on the street without noticing. But he'd spent 20 years following money trails for the FBI before opening his own elite fraud investigation firm 7 years ago. And when he spread color-coded files across Fletcher's glass conference table, he did it with the precision of a surgeon laying out instruments, bank records, business filings, wire transfer logs, IP registration documents. Each folder a different shade, each representing a different layer of the conspiracy. Vanessa's company, Dalton began his voice quiet but relentless, is called Langley Designs LLC. It generates roughly $400,000 annually in revenue. $400,000. From my designs. From 42 years of my work. I cross-referenced her filed patents with your workshop archive. Dalton continued opening a blue folder. 127 design patents in the last 3 years. Every single one is yours. Rebranded, redated. Filed under her LLC as original work. I'd known about the theft. But seeing it quantified, seeing the systematic nature of it laid out in spreadsheets and registration documents, made something twist in my chest. $400,000 a year, I said. From my designs? Nah, that's just the furniture company, Dalton replied. The real money is in the real estate scheme your son is running. He slid a red folder across the table. 12 investors, he said. They each wired deposits ranging from $50,000 to $200,000 for pre-construction condos in a development called Cascade Heights. A luxury project allegedly breaking ground next spring. Allegedly, Fletcher repeated. Not the development was never approved, never platted, doesn't exist. But the money is very real. Total $1.3 million. All of it went through accounts Corbin controls. The visible debt, the credit cards, the personal loans, the $520,000 they supposedly owed it was camouflage. Theater. a way to appear desperate while hiding the real money flowing beneath. Corbin wasn't Vanessa's victim. He was the architect. I'd spent 42 years building things. Building furniture that families passed down through generations. Building a business that employed 20 people at its peak. Building a marriage that withstood cancer and recession and grief. And my son had spent 3 years methodically dismantling all of it, piece by piece, joint by joint, until nothing remained but the shell. Yet there's something else, Fletcher said, his voice careful. Something that explains how they got a notary to authenticate a forged power of attorney. Dalton pulled out a thin manila folder, set it in front of me. The notary public who stamped that POA, he said. His name is Roland Caldwell. Does that name mean anything to you? The air went out of the room. I fired him, I said slowly. In 2011, he was stealing materials from the workshop, selling our lumber to competitors, pocketing the cash. I prosecuted him for embezzlement. He lost his workshop certification, Dalton confirmed. Couldn't get bonded work for 5 years. Had to take a notary position at a strip mall on 82nd Avenue just to pay rent. How the hell did Vanessa find a man Harold fired over a decade ago? Fletcher asked. Dalton opened his laptop, turned it toward us. She didn't find him. She hunted him. I recovered her search history through old employee database queries, court record searches, LinkedIn profile scraping. She ran background checks on everyone Harold ever employed, sued, or had a legal dispute with. The screen showed a spreadsheet. Dozens of names. Former employees, contractors who'd sued over payment disputes, competitors I'd beaten out for contracts. Each name had notes beside it, grudge potential high, financial vulnerability moderate, recruitment probability strong. My name was at the top, and beneath it a systematic breakdown of everyone I'd ever crossed in 42 years of business. This wasn't opportunistic greed after your wife died, Dalton said quietly. This was a multi-year research operation to identify every vulnerability, every enemy, every pressure point in your entire life. They turned your own history into a weapon. A master carpenter knows anyone can tear down a structure. Destruction takes no skill. But to tear it down this precisely, to weaponize every old grudge recruit, every former enemy exploit, every past mistake, that takes the kind of meticulous planning I'd taught him myself. How many, when I asked, how many people did they recruit? At least 6 that I've confirmed, Dalton said. Roland Caldwell as the notary, a former contractor you sued in 2008 who now works at the county assessor's office and expedited their property appraisal. A designer you fired in 2015 who provided authentication letters claiming Vanessa's patents were original work. 2 of the 12 investors in the fake real estate development are business associates of your son from before your wife died, meaning this conspiracy predates her funeral. They'd been planning this while Eleanor was still alive, while I was sitting beside her hospital bed, while I was holding her hand through her final breath. The total fraud, Fletcher said, his voice flat, is approximately $1.82 million. The HELOC they're planning to execute in December would add another $2.4 million. If they succeed, they walk away with over $4 million of your money, your property, and your life's work. Dalton closed the last folder and looked at me with something approaching sympathy. Harold, they didn't just study your house or your finances. They studied your entire life. Every person you ever fired, every business dispute, every enemy you made in 42 years. They built a database of everyone who might help destroy you, and they recruited them one by one. I sat in that leather chair in Fletcher's office looking at the spreadsheet of my own past, weaponized against me. and I understood finally what Fletcher had meant 72 hours ago. This was worse than I thought, because they hadn't just stolen from me. They had turned my entire history, every hard decision, every firing I'd done to protect my business, every lawsuit I'd won into ammunition. And they had been loading that ammunition for 3 years. Knowing your enemy has weaponized your history is one thing. Watching them execute the plan in real time is another. I pressed my back against the rough bark of the weeping willow Eleanor had planted 30 years ago, watching my son sell my house to strangers. It was August, 4 months before Christmas, and the afternoon heat made the air shimmer above the slate roof I'd installed myself in 1989. Corbin stood in the center of the backyard, my backyard, the lawn I'd mowed every Saturday for 40 years, leading 4 men in expensive suits across the grass like a tour guide in a museum. "As you can see," Corbin said, gesturing toward the house with the easy confidence of ownership, "the property sits on just over 2 acres of prime Oregon timber country. The structure is solid, built by hand in 1984. Market value has increased 340% in the last decade alone." One of the investors, a tall man with silver at his temples, pulled out a leather portfolio and flipped through pages. "What about the current title holder?" he asked. "Your documentation shows the property is in Harold Langley's name. Will that pose a legal obstacle when the loan clears?" I held my breath behind Eleanor's tree, waiting. Corbin smiled. Not the warm smile I remembered from his childhood. Something colder, more practiced. "Don't worry about Harold," he said, his voice casual, dismissive. "He won't be a problem much longer. The necessary legal instruments are already in place. By the time the transfer executes, he'll be settled elsewhere." Settled elsewhere, like I was furniture to be stored, like I was a problem to be solved. I stood behind Eleanor's willow tree, the tree she'd planted the year Corbin learned to ride a bike. The tree she'd wanted to shade the garden where we'd grow old together, and listen to our son describe me as a problem that needed to be eliminated. The tree's branches hung low around me like a curtain, the leaves rustling in the August heat. I'd never felt more hidden or more alone. The investors asked more questions. Corbin answered each one with the kind of detail that proved he'd done his research. Property tax rates, recent comparable sales, development potential for subdivision. He spoke about my house the way a butcher talks about cuts of meat. When they finally left, walking around the side of the house toward the driveway where their expensive cars waited, I stayed behind the willow for another 20 minutes, making sure they were really gone. Making sure Corbin didn't come back. Then I drove straight to Dalton's office. "You were right," I told him when I walked in. "They're not waiting until December to start executing. They're already selling the property, already telling investors I won't be a problem." Dalton didn't look surprised. He pulled up a file on his computer, turned the monitor toward me. "I recovered deleted emails from Corbin's private account," he said quietly. "The institutionalization plan is worse than we thought." Worse. Somehow it was always worse. "He's not planning to put you in a nursing home," Dalton continued. "He's arranged an unlicensed care facility. No state oversight, no patient rights, no regulatory inspections. It's owned through a shell company by one of the loan sharks he owes money to." "Why unlicensed?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "Because they need you to film a video confession first. Voluntary asset transfer. Sound mind and body. The whole performance. Then they move you to a real facility with a falsified dementia diagnosis, so you can't recant. By the time anyone questions it, you'll be medicated, institutionalized, and legally incompetent." The words hung in the air like smoke. Video confession. Falsified diagnosis. Medicated. When I asked, December 27th, one day after the loan clears, transport via an unlicensed medical service, which, by the way, is a federal crime. 18 U.S.C. Section 1365. They're so focused on stealing your money, they're racking up federal charges like parking tickets. A master carpenter sees the failure before it happens. Sees the split in the grain, the rot in the beam, the stress fracture that will collapse the whole structure. I'd been watching the cracks spread for 8 months. Now I could see exactly when and how they planned to bring the whole house down with me buried inside it. "Show me the email," I said. Dalton clicked to another screen. There it was in Corbin's own words. Transport scheduled December 27th, 0600 hours. Subject will be non-compliant, but medically sedated per Dr. W's protocol. Video recording must be completed before transfer to licensed facility. Ensure audio quality confession needs to be legally defensible. Subject: like I was a lab experiment, medically sedated, like I was livestock. Confession: like I was guilty of something. There's more, Dalton said, pulling up another file. The unlicensed facility is in eastern Washington. Crossing state lines with a patient under false medical pretenses is kidnapping. Federal jurisdiction. FBI involvement. If we can prove intent, they're looking at 20 years minimum. If we can prove intent, I repeated. Harold Dalton said carefully. I've been doing this for 27 years. I've seen embezzlement. I've seen fraud. I've seen children steal from dying parents. But I have never seen anything this calculated, this comprehensive, this evil. I finished. He didn't disagree. I walked out of Dalton's office into the October rain. 3 months had passed since that August afternoon behind the willow tree. 3 months of Dalton building evidence while I played the confused old man and pulled my coat tight against the cold. December 27th, they'd given me their exact timeline. Loan clears the 26th. Kidnapping the 27th. Asset transfer and institutionalization before New Year's. They had spent 8 months building this trap with professional precision. And I had exactly 68 days to dismantle every piece of it. 68 days wasn't much time to tear down what they'd spent 8 months building. But a master carpenter knows that demolition done right is faster than construction. Fletcher spread 7 documents across his mahogany desk, like he was dealing cards in a high-stakes game. "You'll sign here, here, and here," he said, tapping each page with his pen. "Once your signature hits these trust documents, your son's power of attorney becomes worthless paper." I stood in Fletcher's private conference room on the 31st floor, looking out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the Willamette River flowing below. October afternoon, light slanted through the glass, turning the water gold. Somewhere out there, Corbin and Vanessa thought they were 68 days away from stealing everything I'd ever built. They had no idea I was about to make it impossible. "Walk me through it one more time," I said. Fletcher pulled the first document toward him. "An irrevocable trust transfers legal ownership of your assets to the trust entity itself. You remain the sole beneficiary during your lifetime, but you no longer technically own the property. Which means the forged power of attorney can't touch it." Exactly. Corbin's POA grants him authority over Harold Langley's assets. But once these are in the Eleanor Holloway Elder Protection Trust, they're not your assets anymore. They're the trust's. The Eleanor Holloway Elder Protection Trust. Named for the woman who would have loved the symmetry of it, her memory used as a shield against the son who'd betrayed us both. "The total?" I asked. "I'd 4.6 million. Your house appraised at 2.8. The workshop property 600,000. Your design portfolio and intellectual property rights valued at 1.2 million. Everything I'd built in 42 years reduced to line items on a legal document. And the timing. Today is October 17th. Christmas Eve is December 24th. That's 68 days. The Uniform Voidable Transactions Act requires a 60-day window to protect against claims that you transferred assets to avoid creditors. We're comfortably over that threshold. I picked up the pen. Each signature was like setting a mortise joint irreversible once the glue dried. I'd built my career on joints that couldn't be undone without destroying the whole piece. Now I was building a legal structure with the same permanence. I signed the first document, the second, the third. There's one more thing, Fletcher said as I reached the 5th page. A provision I added for insurance. I looked up. Dia, if you die or are involuntarily institutionalized within 2 years of this trust's creation, the entire estate doesn't pass to Corbin as your heir. It goes to the National Elder Abuse Prevention Coalition. I set down the pen. A poison pill. A poison pill. Fletcher confirmed. They can forge documents. They can lie to doctors. They can execute their kidnapping plan. But even if they succeed in institutionalizing you, even if the worst happens, and you don't survive their care facility, they get nothing. Zero. The house they're trying to steal becomes a donation to an organization that prosecutes people exactly like them. The weight of that settled over me. Not just protection, weaponization. Turning their own scheme into evidence of elder abuse, turning my estate into a permanent middle finger to anyone who thought they could profit from my death. Sign here, Fletcher said quietly, pointing to the final line. I signed, my hand steady, my conscience clear. It's done, Fletcher said, gathering the documents. As of this moment, Corbin's forged POA is worthless. The HELOC application he submitted will be rejected. He no longer has authority to borrow against property he doesn't control. The institutionalization plan collapses because he can't legally commit you without your consent, and even if he tries, he gains nothing. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt Eleanor's absence like a weight pressing on my chest. She would have been sitting beside me for this. She would have been the one suggesting the trust name. She would have smiled at the poison pill provision. There's something else, Fletcher said. He walked to his desk and returned with my old laptop, Eleanor's laptop, the one I'd asked him to examine weeks ago. My IT specialist recovered some deleted files, email drafts Eleanor never sent. He handed me a printed page. The date at the top read February 8th, 2023, 4 months before she died. The subject line, to send to Harold, keep private. My hands shook as I read. Harold, I don't know how to tell you this. I don't know if I should. But I've been watching Corbin lately, really watching him, and I'm frightened. He's been coming by when you're at the workshop, asking questions about the house value, about your health, about the designs in your archive. Yesterday I caught him photographing your blueprint cabinet when he thought I was napping. I asked him why. He smiled and said he was just admiring your work. But his eyes. Harold, I'm no longer afraid of Vanessa. The person I'm afraid of is our own son because he can look at his father with completely empty eyes. I read the last line 3 times. Completely empty eyes. She'd seen it. Months before she died. Months before I finally admitted to myself what my son had become. She'd seen it and tried to protect me from the truth. How many nights had Eleanor lain beside me carrying this knowledge like a stone in her chest? How many times had she opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again to protect me? She noticed him photographing your blueprints in January 2023. Fletcher said quietly. 5 months before she died. 11 months before he would file those patents under Vanessa's company, claiming them as original work. Evidence. Timestamp evidence. Proof of premeditation. Eleanor knew, I said. She knew, and she was trying to document it. Fletcher slid one final document across the desk. There's something else on the laptop, he said. Eleanor kept a folder labeled Corbin, Evidence. She was building her own case file, And Harold, she had photographs. Eleanor's photographs would wait. They were evidence, and I needed them safe. But first, I needed to make Corbin and Vanessa believe they'd already won. I asked Corbin the same question 3 times in 8 minutes, watching his eyes light up each time I pretended to forget his answer. What day is it again, son? I said at the breakfast table, my voice uncertain, my hand shaking slightly as I reached for the coffee pot. I keep thinking it's September. Corbin set down his phone, his expression shifting into practiced concern. It's November, Dad. You asked me that 10 minutes ago. Bon dia. I repeated slowly as if testing the word. Right, November. I'm sorry, the days blend together sometimes. Vanessa looked up from her laptop at the far end of the table. She didn't say anything, but her fingers moved across her phone screen, taking notes, documenting. Did I take my medication this morning? I asked, reaching for my pill organizer. I can't remember if you took it. Corbin said, his voice gentle but his eyes calculating. I watched you take it 20 minutes ago. Remember, you were standing right there by the sink. I looked at the sink. Let confusion cloud my face. Oh. Yes. I think I remember that. Vanessa leaned toward Corbin, her voice low, but not quite low enough. Should I email Dr. Morrison about this episode? Absolutely, Corbin replied. Document everything. I'd spent 42 years teaching apprentices to read wood-grain oak lies differently than pine maple telegraphs, stress before it splits, and people were no different once you learned their patterns. Corbin's pattern was satisfaction poorly masked as concern. Vanessa's was efficiency in exploitation. Later that morning, while they were both occupied in the office, I accessed Vanessa's laptop. The password was Langley2023, arrogant and predictable. I found the email drafts. Dr. Morrison. Harold continues to show signs of memory deterioration. This morning he asked the same question multiple times within minutes. Recommend cognitive assessment. Judith, our neighbor of 15 years. I'm concerned about Harold. Yesterday he seemed confused about what day it was. Has he been evaluated recently? The emails went back months. March 2023, April, May, June. They'd been building this narrative since March, while Eleanor was still fighting for breath. While she was dying in that hospital bed, they were already laying the groundwork to declare me incompetent. I closed the laptop carefully, left everything exactly as I'd found it, and returned to my garage room to wait. A week later, I executed the second phase. Before I show you what happened next, are you still with me? Comment A, if you think Harold's plan will work, or B, if Corbin will see through it and tell me in one sentence why you chose that answer. I need to know you're reading this the way I'm telling it. Please note what follows includes some recreated details for emotional impact, but the strategy behind it is real. November 16th, 38 days before Christmas. I stood in the kitchen preparing lunch, waiting for the precise moment when both Corbin and Vanessa would be within earshot, but not quite within sight. I let the knife slip from my hand, not dangerously, just clumsily. Then I grabbed the counter edge, gasped, and let my knees buckle. My back. I cried out, my voice sharp with manufactured pain. Christ, my back gave out. Footsteps. Running. Vanessa appeared first, Corbin half a second behind. Harold. Vanessa's voice carried the perfect note of alarm. What happened? On my back. I groaned, one hand pressed to my lower spine. Something twisted. I can't stand up straight. We need to get you to the ER, Vanessa said, already reaching for her phone. No. I shook my head, wincing. No hospitals. They'll want to keep me overnight run tests. I just need to rest. Help me to the garage room. I'll be fine. Corbin and Vanessa exchanged a glance. In that glance, I saw everything opportunity-recognized surveillance plans activated the satisfaction of an invalid father confined to the ground floor where he could be monitored and controlled. "Are you sure, Dad?" Corbin asked. "A back injury at your age." "I'm sure," I said firmly. "Just help me downstairs." They helped me to the garage conversion room, settled me on the narrow bed, brought me water and pillows and empty reassurances. As soon as they left, I heard Corbin's voice in the hallway, low and urgent. "This is perfect. He'll be isolated, we can move freely. And install the monitoring system while he's immobile," Vanessa replied. I lay on that bed for exactly 20 minutes, listening to their footsteps above their muffled voices, planning my imprisonment. Then I got up, moved to the built-in shelving unit I'd installed in 1983, and pressed the hidden latch behind the false backing. The compartment opened. Inside, the original 1981 house blueprints rolled and preserved, documenting every wall stud, every electrical run, every design decision I'd made when this house was just raw lumber and dreams. I spread them across the floor, my reading glasses perched on my nose, my back perfectly fine. Every camera needs power. Every wire needs a conduit. Every conduit needs junction box access. And I had built every single wall in this house. How many hours had I spent in 1981 threading Romex through these walls, labeling every circuit, documenting every junction box location in my meticulous drafter's hand? How many times had I updated these blueprints as I added rooms, finished the basement, installed the garage conversion? Corbin thought he was going to install cameras to watch me. What he didn't understand was that every camera he installed would be plugged into a system I had designed, wired, and documented 42 years ago. I traced my finger along the master bedroom circuit path on the yellowed blueprint following the conduit run to the attic junction box. Then I saw it, the annotation, in my own 42-year-old handwriting, faded but legible. Secondary panel access, false wall, NE corner. A space I'd built for future expansion. A hidden access point in the attic that would let me reach every electrical junction in the house. A space Corbin didn't know existed. I smiled at those blueprints spread across my garage room floor, and I understood something fundamental: you can't surveil a carpenter in the house he built. Because the house itself is on his side. The hidden attic access meant I could reach every junction box, every electrical conduit, every surveillance camera Corbin thought he was installing in secret. But first, I needed to pass another test. The $20 bill under my tool chest wheel was folded lengthwise crisp, as origami positioned exactly where my right caster would crush it if I pulled the chest forward. I spotted it by accident kneeling to retrieve a socket wrench I'd dropped while maintaining my back injury performance. The bill stood upright between the wheel and the concrete floor, positioned for maximum visibility when someone checked whether it had been disturbed. A motion test. If the bill moved, they'd know I was mobile despite my supposed injury. If it stayed in place, I remained convincingly disabled. I left the wrench where it lay and spent 30 minutes shuffling to the basement, moving like every step hurt to retrieve a different wrench from the workbench I'd installed in 1987. The detour took half an hour. The bill never moved. But I understood something important. This wasn't Corbin's style. Too patient, too precise. My son was about grand gestures and quick profits, the forged power of attorney, the $1 million loan scheme, the fake real estate development. Those were his plays, big, bold, greedy. The $20 bill was something else. Methodical, surgical. The kind of trap that required thinking 3 moves ahead. Vanessa, she'd folded it lengthwise so it would stand upright, maximum visibility when checking later. She'd chosen $20 instead of 1 or 5, enough to seem carelessly dropped, not obviously planted. She'd placed it exactly where the tool chest wheel would crush it, creating undeniable proof of movement. I'd underestimated her. That ended now. A week later, I waited until 11 at night. Then I went to the main electrical panel in the basement and killed the master breaker. The entire house went dark. Above me, I heard Corbin swear, heard Vanessa's frustrated voice asking what happened. I gave them 5 minutes to check the panel, find nothing obviously wrong, assume it was a grid problem, and retreat to their bedroom with flashlights. Then I went to work. 4 cameras, 5 hours, complete darkness. Installing cameras in pitch darkness was like setting dovetailed joints by feel alone. You learn to trust your hands' knowledge of angles, your fingers' memory of precisely where surfaces met. I'd built this house. I knew every corner, every ceiling height, every place where a smoke detector wouldn't look suspicious or a book spine would blend perfectly on a shelf. First camera, dining room, smoke detector. I climbed the ladder in total blackness, unscrewed the existing unit by touch, installed the military-grade replacement Fletcher's security contact had provided. Motion activated, infrared capable. Cellular uplink, no Wi-Fi connection to trace, no router logs to discover. Second camera, kitchen overhead light fixture. The hardest install, requiring me to work overhead with arms extended, feeling for the junction box connecting the camera's power feed to the existing wiring while standing on a step stool in complete darkness. Third camera, office. I'd brought a hollowed-out, leather-bound law book, the kind that sat on shelves purely for decoration. Positioned it on the bookshelf with the spine facing out the pinhole lens aimed at the desk where Vanessa conducted her fraud operation. Fourth camera, hallway, air vent. The easiest installation, just a magnetic mount behind the grate. 42 years meant I could navigate these rooms blindfolded. And tonight, I basically was. Each camera I placed, I thought of Eleanor's folder on her laptop. Corbin. Evidence. She'd been building a case while dying. Now I was building mine while they thought I was too broken to fight back. Cellular uplink meant no wires, no router logs, no digital footprints. They'd never know they were performing. Every conversation, every email, every moment they thought they were alone to plot and scheme would be recorded on servers Fletcher controlled. For 5 hours I moved through my own house like a ghost, and some part of me wondered if Eleanor's spirit was doing the same, watching me, guiding my hands in the dark, protecting me the way she'd tried to protect me with that unsent email warning. At 3:30 in the morning, while installing the office camera, I noticed something. There was already a camera in the corner. Corbin's camera. Cheap, visible, mounted with obvious screws to the crown molding. I could see the Wi-Fi indicator light even in the darkness, a tiny red glow that pulsed every few seconds. Amateur. He'd bought a consumer-grade security camera from some big box store and mounted it like he was protecting a convenience store. Wi-Fi dependent, which meant router logs. Visible, which meant I could avoid it or perform for it. Motion activated with a 3-second delay, which meant it missed more than it caught. My cameras would record his camera recording me. They'd capture him watching me on his laptop, confident in his surveillance, unaware he was being surveilled by equipment 3 generations more sophisticated than his bargain bin setup. The irony was almost enough to make me laugh. At 4 a.m., I restored power to the house. Lights flickered on throughout the estate. I heard Corbin and Vanessa stirring upstairs, checking if everything had reset properly. I shuffled back to my garage room, moving slowly, maintaining my injured back performance, even though no one was watching. Even though the cameras I'd installed wouldn't go active until I enabled them remotely. I closed the door, sat on the narrow bed, and pulled out the burner phone Fletcher had provided. The monitoring app opened with 4 green dots pulsing on the screen. All cameras live, all recording. All feeding to encrypted cloud storage that would preserve every frame as evidence. I watched the kitchen feed. Empty. The dining room, dark. The office. Vanessa's laptop closed on the desk. The hallway, motion. Vanessa entered the frame at 4:17 in the morning, moving down the hallway toward the ground floor, toward my garage room. She was carrying something in her hand, but the hallway lighting wasn't bright enough to see what. I sat in my garage room and watched her approach on the phone screen. Her image clear in infrared, her expression focused. She was heading straight for my door, and I was about to find out what she did when she thought I was sleeping. Vanessa had been checking the $20 bill. At 4:17 in the morning, she'd crept to my garage room, used a pen light to verify the trap was undisturbed, and left satisfied that I was truly immobilized. My cameras captured everything, but a week later, Corbin found one of mine. On my phone screen, Corbin froze in the office doorway at 2:47 in the afternoon, head tilted like a dog hearing a frequency humans can't detect, staring directly at the leather-bound law tome on the third shelf. He'd seen it. The lens reflection. Just a glint of light catching the glass at the wrong angle, but enough. I watched him approach the bookshelf, reach for the fake book, examine it. Watched his face shift from confusion to understanding, to something that looked almost like admiration. Then he did something I didn't expect. He put it back, positioned it exactly as he'd found it, lens still aimed at the desk, and walked out of the office. 5 minutes later, he returned with his phone pressed to his ear, speaking loudly enough for the camera's microphone to catch every word. "Yes, Dr. Morrison," he said, his voice perfectly calibrated between concern and exhaustion. "Father specifically asked us to research memory care facilities last week. He said he knows he's declining and wants to make arrangements before it gets worse." Pause as if listening. The violent episodes are getting worse. Yesterday, he threw a coffee mug at Vanessa during breakfast, completely unprovoked. She had a bruise on her shoulder. Another pause. "No, we haven't called the authorities. We're trying to handle it within the family. But if this continues, we may need to consider emergency placement for everyone's safety." He was feeding false evidence through my own camera, building a narrative of violent dementia, creating audio documentation that would support their institutionalization plan, turning my surveillance into ammunition against myself. I met Dalton that evening in his car 3 blocks from my house. See how he glanced at the camera twice? Dalton said, reviewing the footage on his laptop. "Right here, 2:49 p.m. and again at 2:51. And that phone call, he's performing Harold. He knows." "How sophisticated is this?" I asked. "Very. Most people panic when they find surveillance. They destroy it or confront you. Your son weaponized it. That takes planning, training, or very good instincts." How many times had I underestimated my own son, mistaking his laziness for stupidity, his silence for emptiness, his patience for weakness? He wasn't just smart. He was playing my own game back at me and doing it well enough that I had to respect the tradecraft even as I hated what he was using it for. "The other cameras," I asked. "Still operational as far as I can tell. But assume he's looking for them now. Assume he's performing for all of them." I nodded. "Then I need audio." "Audio," something he won't think to look for. Something that's been in this house so long it's invisible. That night, I waited until Corbin and Vanessa left for dinner. Then I went to the dining room and took down the walnut wall clock. I'd built it 28 years ago as a gift for Eleanor on our 30th anniversary. Carved the case from salvaged walnut I'd found at an estate sale, designed the hollow chamber behind the clock face for acoustic resonance, so the pendulum's tick would sound warm and alive instead of mechanical. Eleanor used to stand in the dining room listening to it. "This clock has a good heart, Harold," she'd say. "Listen, you can hear it breathing." She'd meant the pendulum's rhythm, the way the sound filled the hollow chamber. I think she was right in ways she never intended. I removed the back panel with a small screwdriver, careful not to scratch the wood. Inside the pendulum hung in its chamber the brass weight catching the light. The hollow space was exactly what I needed. The audio recorder Fletcher's contact had provided was the size of a USB drive. Military grade. Motion activated. Battery life 6 months. Storage 500 hours. Cellular upload to encrypted cloud. I mounted it inside the pendulum chamber using magnetic clips, positioned so it would never interfere with the clockwork mechanism. The microphone faced forward, aimed toward where Corbin sat during his investor meetings. My hands trembled as I closed the clock's back panel, not from age or injury, but from the weight of turning Eleanor's gift into a listening device, necessary desecration that would have broken her heart or made her proud. I couldn't decide which. I hung the clock back on the wall, wound it, set the time. The pendulum swung, the familiar tick filled the room, and somewhere inside that hollow chamber the recorder activated. Corbin could search for cameras until his eyes bled. He'd never suspect a clock that had hung on this wall since before he learned to drive. 10 days passed. The clock recorded everything. Investor pitches, arguments between Corbin and Vanessa, phone calls about the loan timeline, and then, at 11:52 p.m. on December 21st, 3 days before Christmas, it recorded the conversation I'd been waiting for. I was in my garage room monitoring the audio feed on my phone when Corbin's voice came through crystal clear. "I need you to understand something, Vanessa." His voice was quiet, serious, the way people sound when they're revealing something they've been holding back. "When we take him on Christmas Eve, there's no coming back. Once he's in that facility, he disappears. Legally, medically, permanently." "I know," Vanessa replied. "That's the point." "No, I mean permanently. The unlicensed facility doesn't keep records. No visitor logs. No medical documentation. We film the confession video, transfer him to the licensed place with the dementia diagnosis, and Harold Langley ceases to exist as a functional human being. He becomes a case number in a system designed to forget people." Silence on the recording. Then Vanessa, "Good. He should have died with Eleanor." I sat in my garage room listening to my son and his wife discuss my permanent disappearance like I was a problem to be solved, not a person to be considered. 3 days until Christmas Eve. 3 days until they tried to erase me from existence. But I had their confession, their timeline, their exact plan, and they had no idea what was waiting for them on Christmas Eve when they thought they were winning. Fletcher's office smelled like old books and furniture polish. December 14th, 2023. 57 days since I'd signed the trust. 10 days until Christmas Eve. Dr. Preston Whitfield sat across from me, looking like he hadn't slept in weeks. 58-years-old neurologist, hands shaking as he gripped his coffee cup. The man who'd signed my cognitive assessment declaring me competent in September, then suddenly reversed his opinion in November. "I need you to understand," he said. "Corbin didn't offer me money. I wish he had." Fletcher leaned forward. "Then what did he offer, Dr.?" Whitfield's face went gray. "He offered not to destroy my career." The words hung in the air. I watched him carefully, this broken man who'd nearly cost me everything. Like in 2019, I had a patient named Carlos Mendoza. Whitfield continued. "Stroke symptoms. I misread the imaging, sent him home. He died 3 days later." His voice cracked. The family settled quietly. Medical board never knew. But somehow Corbin found the records. Fletcher's pen scratched across his notepad. What exactly did Corbin threaten? He showed me everything. The misread scans. The settlement agreement. Documentation proving I'd falsified my case notes. Whitfield looked at me, eyes pleading. He said if I didn't declare you incompetent, he'd send it all to the medical board and the Mendoza family's attorney. I'd lose my license, face wrongful death charges, probably go to prison. I felt the rage building, but kept my voice steady. "So you sold me out to save yourself. I'm sorry." The words were barely audible. "I'm so sorry." Fletcher pulled out a small recording device. We need you to record any future calls from Corbin. Can you do that? Whitfield nodded, reaching for the device with trembling hands. He calls every few days, checking that I'm ready to testify about your deteriorating condition when they need me. I'm good, Fletcher said. Next time he calls, you're going to get him admitting to the blackmail. Think you can manage that? Yes. Whitfield straightened slightly, some dignity returning. It's the least I can do. I watched him stand this man, who'd almost destroyed me, to protect himself. Part of me wanted to hate him, but Corbin had chosen his victim well, someone with everything to lose, no way to fight back, just like he'd chosen me. Fletcher showed Whitfield out, returned to his desk. We've got him on extortion now. Combined with the HELOC fraud and the POA violations, we're building something substantial. It's not enough, I said. We need them on tape discussing what they did to Eleanor. Hi, we might get it, Fletcher replied. The pattern shows escalating confidence. They think they've won. People get careless when they think they've won. He was right about that. I'd spent months being careful, watching every word, planning every move. But Corbin and Vanessa, they were getting sloppy. The December 21st recording from the Walnut Clock would prove it. 7 days later, December 21st, 11:47 p.m. I sat in my garage room, headphones on, listening to the audio recorder from Eleanor's Walnut Clock. The device Fletcher's tech specialist had installed was military-grade, designed to pick up whispers from 20 feet away. Corbin's voice came through crystal clear. 4 days, Vanessa. Christmas Eve morning, you make the call to Dr. Whitfield. He shows up at noon, does his assessment, determines Dad's an immediate danger to himself. We have the ambulance and transfer paperwork ready. And the facility. Vanessa's voice cold and clinical. Our Brookside Behavioral will take him immediately. Cash payment, no questions. Dr. Morrison's already signed the admission orders. I'd suspected Dr. Morrison was involved. Now I had proof. What about Fletcher? Vanessa asked. Won't matter. By the time he files anything, Dad will be legally committed. Medical determination, 2 doctors' signatures, immediate family consent. Fletcher can't reverse that. And the trust, Corbin laughed. The trust requires him to be of sound mind. Once he's institutionalized, we challenge it as signed under diminished capacity. Judge sees he's in a psychiatric facility, sees Dr. Whitfield's assessment, sees Dr. Morrison's documentation. Trust gets voided, estate goes through normal probate. We're his only heirs. Silence for a moment. Then Vanessa spoke, voice lower. You're sure about the long-term plan? What do you mean? I mean, once he's in Brookside. How long before? She trailed off. Before what? Corbin's voice had changed, wary now. Before the situation resolves itself, Vanessa said carefully. These facilities, things happen. Medication errors, falls, infections. Corbin was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried something new, something dangerous. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? I'm suggesting, Vanessa said, that a 72-year-old man in a psychiatric facility is vulnerable. Accidents happen. And with you controlling his medical decisions, you want me to kill him. I want him gone, Vanessa snapped. Permanently, and I want it to look natural. Another silence. Then Corbin spoke, and his words turned my blood to ice. The same way you made Eleanor's death look natural. I stopped breathing, rewound the recording, played it again. The same way you made Eleanor's death look natural. Vanessa's laugh was sharp, brittle. Eleanor had cancer, Corbin. Stage 4. Everyone expected her to die. Expected her to die in 6 months, not 6 weeks, Corbin said. I've seen the medical records, Vanessa. I know what you did. Then we understand each other, Vanessa replied. We both have secrets. We both have everything to gain. So when we take him on Christmas Eve, there's no coming back. Once he's in that facility, he disappears. Legally, medically, permanently. Good, Corbin said. Just remember, I'm watching you as carefully as you're watching me. Likewise. Vanessa's voice turned silky. Though I should mention, if you become a problem, I'll handle the Corbin problem the same way we handled Eleanor. The recording ended. Footsteps. A door closing. Silence. I sat in the darkness, headphones still on Eleanor's walnut clock on the table before me. The clock she'd loved. The clock that had just captured her killer's confession. 3 days until Christmas Eve. 3 days to finish what I'd started. I replayed Vanessa's words one final time, the same way we handled Eleanor, then ejected the micro SD card and locked it in the wall safe behind Eleanor's portrait. 3 days had become hours. Christmas Eve morning had arrived. I let my hand shake when I reached for the coffee mug, watching Vanessa track the tremor like a hawk watching a dying rabbit. "Careful, Harold," Corbin said from across the kitchen table, voice dripping false concern. "You don't want to burn yourself again." I gripped the mug with both hands, let coffee slosh slightly. What day is it?" Vanessa's eyes sharpened. She wore black, always black lately, and her makeup was flawless at 8 in the morning. "It's Christmas Eve. We discussed this yesterday, and the day before." "Oh." I blinked slowly, manufactured confusion crossing my face. "Christmas Eve. Eleanor loved Christmas." "Yes." Vanessa's voice was ice. "We know." I watched her watch me. She was looking for confirmation proof that her plan would work, that the man fumbling with his coffee at 8 a.m. would be easily committed by noon, easily disappeared by nightfall. I gave her what she wanted. Let my gaze drift to the window where fresh snow was falling. Let my expression go vague. "We have very important guests tonight." "Harold, I see." Vanessa said each word precisely placed. "Investors, stay downstairs. Don't embarrass us." I turned to her slowly, voice quavering exactly right. "Of course, dear, I'll stay in my room." "What day is it again?" Corbin exchanged a glance with Vanessa. She nodded slightly. He stood, touched my shoulder with exaggerated gentleness. "It's Christmas Eve, Dad. We'll check on you later." They left the kitchen together, Vanessa's heels clicking against hardwood I'd laid 40 years ago. I counted to 30. Then my hand steadied around the coffee mug, tremor vanishing like it had never existed. Through the window, snow fell soft and silent. Eleanor would have enjoyed this part. She always loved it when I finished a project exactly right. The morning crawled past. I stayed in my garage room reviewing evidence one final time. The HELOC documents. The forged POA signatures. Dr. Whitfield's confession about Mendoza. The December 21st recording from the walnut clock. I'll handle the Corbin problem the same way we handled Eleanor. I closed my eyes, felt the weight of those words. Not just cancer, not just inevitable, something darker, something I'd prove later. First things first. At 6:15 p.m. I heard cars arriving. I powered on the hidden iPad connected to the dining room camera, the one they didn't know about, the one installed in the smoke detector above the china cabinet. The screen showed perfect clarity. Everyone settling into chairs around the table Eleanor had chosen 30 years ago. Vanessa sat at the head. Corbin beside her, playing supportive partner. Vernon Ashford sat across from them, 62, commercial real estate investor with steel gray hair and a handshake that meant contracts. His wife Celeste adjusted her glasses and opened a leather portfolio, sharp-eyed and sharper with numbers. Graham Sinclair settled into his chair, 55, self-made developer with cautious eyes that had kept him wealthy. Beside him, Ellsworth Redmond, 68, semi-retired but still sharp, studied the room like he was calculating square footage and resale value. Vanessa launched her pitch. With the expanded credit line clearing next week, we're positioned to acquire the Hillsborough properties by January 15th. Your returns will triple within 18 months. Vernon leaned forward. We've been reviewing the numbers. The leverage ratios are aggressive but manageable if the underlying assets perform. Oh, they will, Corbin said smoothly. I've engineered the structural analysis myself. The properties are undervalued by at least 40%. Timing a confrontation was like timing a dovetail cut strike too early, and the joint won't hold too late, and the wood splits. There's one perfect moment when everything locks together, when all the pieces align and pressure turns into permanence. I'd been waiting 6 months for that moment. Celeste tapped her pen against her portfolio. And the title work is complete. Absolutely, Vanessa said. All documentation is in order. Graham Sinclair cleared his throat. Between us, we've already committed $300,000 based on your projections. When do we see the property titles? My pulse quickened. Already committed. Already transferred. Ellsworth nodded. I wired 153 weeks ago. Graham sent his half last Monday. We'd like to review the actual deeds before committing additional funds. There it was. Wire transfers. Forged property deeds. Securities fraud in real time documented on my hidden camera, confessed in front of witnesses who didn't yet understand they were victims. Vanessa's smile never wavered. The title transfers are processing through escrow. You'll have certified copies by January 2nd. She was buying time. Time to make me disappear. Time to access the estate. Time to cover one fraud with another, stacking lies until they thought they'd built something solid. Through the iPad screen, I watched Corbin pour wine. Watched Vanessa gesture at projected returns. Watched 4 investors lean in, believing trusting investing in their own destruction. My phone buzzed. Text from Silas Mercer Dalton's younger brother, surveillance specialist, waiting in the van 3 blocks away with recording equipment. Van in position. Fletcher and Dalton ready. When you signal. I checked my watch. 7:14 p.m. Everyone assembled. Investors committed, but not yet irretrievably lost. Corbin and Vanessa at peak confidence, convinced their senile victim was trembling downstairs. Evidence documented, witnesses, present, allies positioned. The perfect moment. The one instant when victim became prosecutor, when isolation became power, when 6 months of careful planning crystallized into action. I stood, straightened Eleanor's favorite tie, the navy silk she'd given me for our 30th anniversary, and felt her hand on my shoulder, steady as always, pushing me forward. 6 months of playing weak. 6 months of documenting crimes. 6 months of being underestimated by people who thought age meant vulnerability. Tonight it ended. I walked through the garage, up the back stairs, down the hallway toward the dining room. Each step deliberate. Each breath controlled. I wasn't the trembling old man from this morning. I was the carpenter who'd built this house, the husband who'd loved Eleanor for 44 years. The father who'd been stolen from, and lied to, and marked for destruction. The dining room door stood before me. Through the wood I heard Vanessa's laugh, crystalline and false, and beneath it, the murmur of confident voices discussing returns and timelines and futures that would never happen. My hand wrapped around the brass door handle I'd installed 32 years ago, back when this house meant family instead of battlefield. The metal was cool and familiar against my palm. Through the door, someone asked a question. Vanessa began to answer. I turned the handle. The door swung open. The room went silent when I entered, and I let the cane fall from my hand to clatter on the hardwood floor I'd laid 41 years ago. I stood upright in the cedar-scented suit Eleanor had bought me for our 40th anniversary. No tremor, no confusion. No performance. Vanessa recovered first. Harold, we're in the middle of an important dinner. No, I can see that. I looked at each face around the table. Graham and Ellsworth, who'd already lost $300,000. Vernon and Celeste about to lose more. Corbin wineglass frozen. Vanessa seated at the head where Eleanor used to sit. The table I'd built with my own hands. This dinner is for people who create value. Harold, Vanessa said, voice dripping contempt. You're just a breathing invoice waiting to be settled. The investors shifted uncomfortably. Vernon cleared his throat. I smiled, looked at the oak table's dovetail joints, still perfect after all these years. Enjoy your dinner, I said softly. Then I walked toward the front door. Behind me, Corbin whispered, let him go. He's harmless. I reached the foyer, pulled the door open. Owen Hawthorne stood on the porch, 52 years old, master furniture restorer, with sawdust still under his fingernails. Behind him, 6 workshop craftsmen waited beside a covered object on a wheeled platform. Right on time, I said. He finished it this morning, Owen said. 3 months of work, but she's perfect now. They wheeled it through the foyer. I followed them back toward the dining room, where conversation had resumed. The craftsman rolled the platform into the center and stopped. Vanessa's voice cut off mid-sentence. Owen and his team removed the covering. Eleanor's vanity stood before them, fully restored. Cherry wood glowing under chandelier light. Every scratch removed. Every joint reinforced. The beveled mirror gleaming. The brass handles I'd installed in 1987 polished to perfection. Dead silence. I looked at Vanessa. You sold our past to pay your debts. I bought it back with the last money you hadn't stolen yet. Her face went white. Eleanor's table has come home, I said. How did you that sold for $18,000 you don't have? Vanessa's voice cracked. Eleanor's vanity sat in the center of the room like a resurrection. And for the first time in 6 months, I felt her presence not as absence but as vindication. I turned back toward the still open door. Fletcher Garrison walked in flanked by 2 federal agents. Special Agent Marcus Rosen, 41 Elder Crimes Division, with 20 years of fraud cases in his steady voice. Beside him, Special Agent Sarah Cole, 36 wire fraud specialist, handcuffs already at her belt. What the hell is this? Corbin stood. Fletcher set his briefcase on Eleanor's vanity. Federal charges. Wire fraud, forged power of attorney, elder abuse, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, interstate fraud. My father suffers from advanced dementia, Corbin said quickly. He's been unstable for months. Ask any of these witnesses. Dr. Whitfield has documented his deterioration, Vanessa added. Multiple assessments. We've been trying to get him proper care. I pulled out the iPad. Let me show you something. I pressed play. The walnut clock recording filled the room through house speakers I'd wired 30 years ago. Crystal clear. Corbin's voice. 4 days, Vanessa. Christmas Eve. Morning you make the call to Dr. Whitfield. He shows up at noon, does his assessment, determines Dad's in immediate danger to himself. We have the ambulance and transfer paperwork ready. Vanessa's face drained. The recording continued. Their voices discussing Brookside Behavioral. Cash payments. Forged admission orders. The trust they planned to void. Then the twist. Corbin's voice. The same way you made Eleanor's death look natural. Vanessa's laugh. Eleanor had cancer, Corbin. Stage 4. Everyone expected her to die. Corbin. Expected her to die in 6 months, not 6 weeks. I've seen the medical records, Vanessa. I know what you did. Vanessa cold. Then we understand each other. We both have secrets. So when we take him on Christmas Eve, there's no coming back. Once he's in that facility, he disappears. Legally, medically, permanently. Just remember, I'm watching you as carefully as you're watching me. Corbin stood frozen betrayal across his face. Mutual destruction recorded. I stopped playback. December 21st, 11:47 p.m. recorded by equipment they didn't know existed. Graham Sinclair pulled out folded documents. Agent Rosen, these are the investment contracts. Forged property deeds. We wired $300,000 based on properties that don't exist. Ellsworth handed over his copies. $150,000 3 weeks ago. And this was all Corbin, Vanessa said desperately. I didn't know about the forged deeds. The HELOC applications have your signature, Agent Cole said. 27 separate documents. Agent Rosen pulled out handcuffs. Corbin Langley, Vanessa Langley, you're both under arrest for wire fraud, elder abuse conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and interstate fraud. Metal clicked around their wrists simultaneously. After they were let out, Fletcher turned to the investors. The HELOC Mr. Langley's son forged was flagged and terminated back in October when the irrevocable trust was established. It never cleared. I looked at Graham and Ellsworth. Your money was taken through my name without my knowledge or consent. The trust's intellectual property licensing proceeds will establish a restitution fund. You will be made whole. Graham stared at me. You're compensating us after what they did to you. How do you explain to strangers that compensating them wasn't mercy, but carpentry, making the joints fit right, the angles true, the whole piece square again? It's the right thing to do, I said. By 8:15 p.m., the house was empty again. FBI van gone, investors departed Fletcher, promising morning calls. Owen and his craftsmen paid and thanked. I stood alone in the dining room, with Eleanor's vanity and the oak table I'd built 44 years ago. The silence felt like mine for the first time since she died. Her vanity, her table, her house, ours. The peace lasted an hour and 45 minutes. Then the doorbell rang, and I went to let in the man who would help me reclaim what remained. The locksmith arrived at 10 p.m. Christmas Eve with a toolbox that smelled like machine oil and new brass, and I handed him every key Corbin had ever touched. Ray Hutchins was 47, a locksmith who'd been working Christmas emergencies for 20 years and never asked questions. He looked at the pile of keys in my palm, then at my face. You want me to change all 7 locks tonight? He asked. It's Christmas Eve. Especially because it's Christmas Eve, I said. He nodded once. Where do you want to start? Front door. I watched him work. Watched the old cylinder come out. Watched him measure and fit the new one. Heard the precise clicks as tumblers aligned. Watched him test the mechanism 3 times before handing me the first new key. Brass warm from his hands, sharp edges not yet worn smooth. Back door next, I said. We moved through the house. Back door, garage side entrance, workshop door, basement access, kitchen door to the deck, master bedroom exterior entrance, the one Eleanor had insisted on when we renovated in 2005, saying she liked having her own way out to the garden. 7 locks, 7 new cylinders, 7 new keys. Ray finished at 11:47 p.m. Handed me a brass ring with all 7 keys threaded onto it. That's everything, he said. Old locks are in my truck. You want them? Nope, and I said, thank you. He packed his toolbox. I paid him double his Christmas rate and walked him to the door with the new lock, the door that only my key would open now. After he left, I stood in the foyer holding the key ring, felt the weight of it, the new brass cool against my palm. For 15 years, these keys were mine and Eleanor's. Then for 8 months, they'd been stolen, controlled, weaponized. Corbin had started asserting dominance while Eleanor was still alive, testing boundaries, preparing. Now they were mine again, and this time I knew exactly what they cost. I locked the front door, tested it, locked the back door, tested it. Went to each entrance and turned each lock and felt each bolt slide home with a sound like finality. Christmas morning arrived quiet. The house settled around me. Wind outside. The walnut clock keeping time in the hallway still recording nothing but silence. I made coffee in the kitchen where I'd performed senility just yesterday morning. Sat at the table where Eleanor used to read the newspaper. Looked out at fresh snow covering the garden she'd loved. "Merry Christmas, Eleanor," I said to the empty room. "I got our house back. The phone didn't ring until December 26th. Fletcher's voice tired but satisfied. "Roland Caldwell sang like a bird," he said. "Gave up everything, dates, amounts, Corbin's exact instructions. The DA is building an airtight case." "Good," I said. "Dr. Whitfield accepted a plea deal. Probation, permanent license forfeiture. He'll testify to the blackmail. Changing locks was like resetting a joint that had been forced out of true, painful necessary, and the only way the structure would ever bear weight correctly again." "And the bank?" I asked. Fletcher's voice carried grim satisfaction. "They voided the HELOC the moment they saw the forensic analysis. Internal investigation launched. They're facing regulatory scrutiny now." December 27th, Fletcher called again. "Federal charges are filed," he said. "Wire fraud under 18 U.S.C. Section 1343, POA forgery under Section 495, elder financial abuse under the Elder Abuse Prevention and Prosecution Act, conspiracy to commit bank fraud." "What are they looking at?" I asked. "Corbin faces 20 years federal minimum. Vanessa, 18. The DA wants to make an example. Elder abuse prosecution rarely gets evidence this clean. Audio recordings, forged documents, victim testimony, accomplice cooperation. It's textbook." I looked out the window at snow falling on Eleanor's garden. 20 years. 18 years. Numbers that should have felt like victory. "What's your read on sentencing?" Fletcher asked. "The DA wants to know if you're pushing for maximum." I thought about Corbin at 8 years old helping me build the workshop shelves. Thought about the moment I'd seen his eyes change when I stopped being his father and became a balance sheet. Thought about Vanessa's cold calculation, her willingness to destroy everything for money she'd never actually need. But mostly I thought about the recording. Her voice. "I'll handle the Corbin problem the same way we handled Eleanor." "I don't care about revenge, Fletcher," I said. "I care about the next 72-year-old man whose son looks at him with empty eyes. Make sure this prevents that." Silence on the line. Then Fletcher spoke quietly. "That's the right answer. I'll tell the DA you support maximum sentencing as a deterrent, not as vengeance. It'll carry weight. How many sons were out there right now, watching their father's age doing the same cold math Corbin had done, waiting for the same opportunity? How many daughters-in-law were calculating estate values against care costs, measuring inheritance against inconvenience? The law needed to tell them the cost was too high. "Whatever prevents the next one," I said. December 28th. Fletcher called a third time. His voice was different. Careful. "And Harold, we need to talk about the Graham and Ellsworth Restitution Fund. The Trust's IP licensing revenue projects at $40,000 monthly. Full reimbursement feasible within 9 months. "Good," I said. What else?" He was quiet for a moment. "There's one more thing, Harold. The ME reviewed Eleanor's medical records based on Vanessa's recording. They're reopening the investigation into your wife's death." The line went silent except for my breathing. Outside, snow fell on the garden Eleanor would never see again. Harold, Fletcher's voice distant. "I'm here," I said. "They want to interview you next week. January 4th. Are you ready for that?" I looked at the walnut clock in the hallway. The clock that had recorded Vanessa's confession. The clock Eleanor had loved. "Yes," I said, "I'm ready." The interview was 6 days away. I had work to do before then. The workshop door opened to the smell of cedar and linseed oil, and 6 faces turned toward me, with expressions I hadn't seen in 8 months, respect without pity. December 29th. Morning light filtered through sawdust-hazed windows. The crew stood as I entered, not formally, but the way craftsmen acknowledge a master returning to his bench. Owen Hawthorne stepped forward. "Good to have you back, Harold. The shop's been waiting." I looked around. Everything exactly where Eleanor and I had arranged it 20 years ago. The lumber racks organized by species and grade. The tool wall with each implement on its shadow board. The drafting table where I'd designed everything from dining chairs to entertainment centers, each piece carrying my signature joinery. My fingers found the edge of a cherry board ran along the grain. Smooth. True. Waiting to become something. I picked up a pencil from the drafting table. Same weight. Same familiar friction against paper. I'd forgotten how good it felt to hold something and know exactly what to do with it. Owen set a coffee mug on the drafting table. Same spot he'd been setting it for 20 years. Steam rose in the cold morning air. I looked at the crew. 6 men who'd stayed loyal through everything. Who'd worked under Corbin's hostile takeover and never complained, never quit, never stopped doing the work right. "Let's build something," I said. They moved to their stations like water finding its level. The workshop filled with the sounds I'd been missing. Saw singing through hardwood, plane shaving curls off maple, the precise tap of mallet on chisel. I pulled out a half-finished design from August. A Morris chair with through-tenon arms and quarter-sawn white oak. Eleanor had requested it 3 weeks before she died. I'd never finished it. Now I would. December 30th, I sat across from Fletcher in his office. Different reason this time. Rebecca Thornton sat beside him, 52, licensing director for Craftsman's Guild Collective, who'd spent a decade trying to acquire my design portfolio. She had sharp eyes that read quality the way I read grain. 42 years of designs, Mr. Langley, she said, spreading blueprints across Fletcher's conference table. The furniture industry has been waiting for this portfolio. Your craftsmanship is legendary. I looked at the drawings. Chairs, tables, cabinets, entertainment centers, bedroom sets, each one carrying joinery techniques I'd refined over 4 decades. Each one representing weeks or months of problem-solving testing, perfecting. The intellectual property Corbin had tried to claim as his own. Fletcher slid the contract across the table. Exclusive licensing agreement with Craftsman's Guild Collective. They'll manufacture your designs under your name, maintaining your quality standards. Every dollar of royalties flows directly into the Eleanor Holloway Elder Protection Trust Legal Defense Fund. In perpetuity. Signing those licensing contracts was like finishing a dovetail joint. Eleanor and I started 40 years ago, her vision my hands, and now a legacy that would hold long after both of us turned to dust. Rebecca watched me read the terms. The royalty structure projects between $35,000 and $50,000 monthly depending on production volume. Quality manufacturers have been asking for access to these techniques for years. I picked up Fletcher's pen. Signed my name on the line that would transform 42 years of craft into perpetual protection. The designs they tried to steal would now shield strangers from sons like mine. Eleanor would have loved the symmetry. "Thank you," Rebecca said, standing to shake my hand. "This is going to help a lot of people." That's the idea," I said. December 31st arrived quiet. I spent New Year's Eve alone in the living room, leather armchair pulled close to the fireplace. Wood crackling, snow falling outside the window. 8 months from Eleanor's last breath to Corbin's handcuffs. Felt like 8 years. Felt like 8 minutes. I thought about April when Corbin moved in with his concerned voice and his careful questions about my finances. About May when I first noticed money disappearing. About June when I installed the first hidden camera. About every moment between then and Christmas Eve when I'd played the trembling old man while documenting every crime. No regrets about the justice. Corbin and Vanessa earned every charge every year they'd face. The law needed to tell other predatory children that the cost was too high. But grief, that was different. I looked at Eleanor's photograph on the mantel. Taken in the workshop 15 years ago, sawdust in her hair, laughing at something I'd said. She'd loved watching me work. Loved the way wood became furniture, the way joints locked together, the way patient craftsmanship created permanence. A carpenter knows wood can be strong or weak before you cut it. The grain tells everything if you know how to read it. I'd been reading timber for 50 years. Could tell from a glance whether walnut would hold screws, whether maple would take stain evenly, whether oak had the integrity for load-bearing joints. I should have read Corbin's grain sooner. The hardest truth a father faces isn't that his son became a monster. It's that the monster was always there, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right conditions to emerge. I'd loved someone who'd been hollow that long without my seeing it. That was the grief. Not the betrayal, not the theft, not even the attempted kidnapping, the blindness. The years of missing what should have been obvious to someone who knew how to read character the way I read timber. Outside, the snow stopped falling. The yard lay clean and unmarked. Fresh start. Blank page. Whatever metaphor fit. I checked my watch. 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes until midnight. Until a new year that Eleanor wouldn't see in a house that finally felt like mine again, with justice approaching for crimes I'd spent 6 months documenting. My phone lit up. Text from Fletcher. M.E. Preliminary findings elevated digitalis in Eleanor's tissue samples. Consistent with intentional overdose. Happy New Year, Harold. We get justice for her too. I read it twice. Then a third time. Digitalis. Heart medication. Easy to overdose. Easy to disguise in a cancer patient already taking multiple medications. Vanessa. I'll handle the Corbin problem the same way we handled Eleanor. Not a threat, a confession. I looked at Eleanor's photograph, at her laugh, at the sawdust in her hair. 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes until midnight. One more fight left. The grandfather clock struck 12. I raised my Scotch glass to Eleanor's portrait above the fireplace, 57 years old, in that photograph, taken before the cancer, before Corbin's eyes went empty, before any of this began. They came for everything, I said to the empty room. Outside fireworks split the midnight sky. The fire crackled its indifferent reply. I told her what I'd survived. 8 months April through Christmas Eve of watching my own son treat me like inventory. The house, the workshop, the designs, 42 years of what we'd built together, nearly stolen through forgery and patience and careful systematic cruelty. Corbin had planned it brilliantly. He'd simply miscalculated one thing. He'd forgotten what his mother taught me. A house without windows just means the light comes from inside. I'd kept that light burning. Hidden cameras, micro SD cards, the loyalty of the workshop crew, Fletcher's methodical documentation. The evidence had accumulated in silence while Corbin celebrated what he believed was his inheritance. When the moment came, every piece was in place. 10 minutes before midnight, Fletcher had texted. The medical examiner found digitalis in Eleanor's tissue samples. Murder, they were calling it now. Intentional overdose. Vanessa's work. I touched Eleanor's portrait frame and made her a quiet promise. Justice for that too. But tonight belonged to gratitude. I slept in the chair and woke to January 1st light bleeding orange through the curtains. 72 years old. Joints protesting. 8 months older than when this started. 8 months stronger than they'd calculated. I walked to the home office. The drafting desk stood in its proper place, returned from the workshop where Corbin had exiled it, positioned near the east window exactly where Eleanor had insisted it belonged. She'd understood that a carpenter needs morning light, needs to see grain and shadow, needs clarity above everything. I laid a blank sheet of paper on the surface, pressed pencil to it. A writing desk took shape beneath my hand. Simple lines, quarter-sawn oak, through tenon construction. 29 inches high, a measurement I'd tested across 4 decades of work. Built to last generations. Not for money, not for the licensing deal. Because this was who I was, and 8 months of systematic destruction couldn't reach that deep. I thought about the people the trust would serve. 70-year-olds with predatory children, 80-year-olds with forged signatures and empty accounts, widows and widowers who'd built something real only to watch their own blood dismantle it. They'd need lawyers, documentation, advocates. But first, they'd need to remember they weren't helpless. This desk would be donated to the Elder Advocacy Center Fletcher was helping establish, a place for people to document their abuse, to plan their defense, to reclaim their voice. Built in Eleanor's memory for everyone she would have wanted to protect. Corbin had seen a balance sheet. Vanessa had seen an obstacle. They'd both made the same fundamental error. Blood is not a license to abuse. Love is not a blank check. And an old man with a pencil and 42 years of knowledge is never as helpless as you think. I signed the design, dated it January 1st, 2024. The sun climbed higher. Eleanor's portrait watched from the living room. The walnut clock ticked steadily in the hallway. I was 72 years old, and I was just getting started. And to you listening to my story, remember this. I spent 42 years building things with my hands, reading wood grain like a language. But I missed the most important grain of all, my own son's character. I trusted blood over evidence, love over instinct. Don't make my mistake. The people closest to you deserve scrutiny, not blind faith. Family doesn't mean immunity from accountability. This wasn't just my fight for family justice. It's the fight every elderly person faces when their children see inheritance instead of legacy. These dads' revenge stories aren't about vengeance. They're about refusing to be erased. I believe God allowed me to see clearly when it mattered most, to document what needed documenting, to stand when they expected me to fall. True family justice isn't about punishment, it's about protection. Protecting yourself, protecting others who'll face the same predatory children, and proving that 72 years of experience is power, not weakness. If this story moved, you leave a comment below. Tell me, was I right to expose them, or should family stay protected? If you know someone facing elder abuse, share this. And if you believe these dads' revenge stories need to be told, subscribe to Wise Revenge. Your support helps me share more stories of dignity reclaimed. Thank you for staying until the very end. Some details in this story have been fictionalized for narrative impact, but the core message that elder abuse can be fought and dignity can be restored is very real. Take care of yourself.